Okay, so kind of the next thing to talk about here is just applications of Notability within the math classroom, or how exactly I've been utilizing it. So, kind of broken up into two pieces. The new note is great for a couple different reasons. I found that it's really helped me kind of going from helping one or two students with a issue or just a problem that they're struggling with as we're practicing a particular skill, to now being able to reach multiple students across the classroom without me having to kind of return to the front of the room and get their attention. So if I'm working with a small group, before I was just kind of stuck with writing on a piece of paper for only those students to see. But now with this Notability and with my iPad and Apple TV technology, I'm able to now work with that small group right on my Notability app, and that's now projected for everyone in the classroom to see. So someone sitting across the room, maybe they weren't able to ask me yet, I just didn't get around to them, but now they have the ability to kind of take a glance up at the board, see if someone else is having the same issue. So I'm able to help more students without really having to physically be right there. So that is a great feature. The other nice thing, and I've talked about this a little bit before, is just displaying student work. So with the new note option, you're able to just like quickly gather student input. So whether that be you're writing out a student work, whether you're letting the student write it on your iPad, so they're a little bit more comfortable explaining themselves, but either way, the ability to capture quickly and just record what students say can really help promote that collaboration and just that community in the classroom, and kind of boost that confidence as students are explaining their math. Kind of with that new note feature is just importing images. So I use that feature all the time to take screenshots, to then write on the images, and actually I love to use it to really look at textbook examples. So for instance, what I can do with this is we do a lot of number talk, so maybe I want to pull up which one doesn't belong problem. So I can come to this page, I can zoom in, and maybe I want students to talk from here. But again, the issue is that I'm not able to write on that screen and record what students are saying. So what I can do instead is take an actual screenshot of that image. And if I go back then to Notability, I'm able to go to that section that I want it to be in. I can create a new note quick, and I can pull up that image. So if I go to my media, it's right there, and it automatically adds in there, and I'm able to kind of record what students say. So maybe a student said that this one didn't belong because it was the only one that was even. So I can kind of capture those different statements. The other nice thing with that too is that I'm actually able to save student input. So something we did as a math team was give the same warm-up to different levels of math classes and kind of compare what types of things students were coming up with at different levels. So that's a great way to, or a nice feature, is that input that I write down or that students write down themselves is saved onto my iPad. The other thing with this, I think I mentioned before that sometimes I like to grab textbook examples. So I think that's something that students kind of struggle with, is just reading math and interpreting math for themselves. And we try to talk about just the different resources they have and just being fluent with those resources. So I'm able to take a picture of an example directly from our textbook, and we can kind of talk through those steps together. Well, what was the first step? Why does that step make sense? If that's the first step for that example, what would my first step be for this guided practice problem? So that's kind of a nice way for us to look at that together as a class without having to kind of shift back and forth between different tools and different resources. Let's see here. I think kind of the next thing I wanted to talk about was just what this looks like as we are kind of using our own documents. So the ability to upload specific files is what I love because it allows for me to have cohesive and current class notes. And with those documents, just the ability to share those, as I spoke before, share those directly to a Google Drive folder, so students gain that immediate access. So a lot of times what I do is I import our warm-ups, our worksheets, and a check for understanding that I like to do for students. And again, the nice thing about this is that the sheet students have in front of them on their desk is exactly what they see on the board. So it just kind of takes care of that communication and that understanding piece, that if a student has a question about a particular spot, I'm not wasting time trying to flip back and trying to look for that. I have it right in front of me as well. And again, as I kind of spoke before, all this work is saved onto Notability. So just so you get a taste of what this looks like. So for instance, within my Algebra 1 class, they have note guides. So all I had to do was upload the note guide that my students have, and now I'm working through the exact same examples of them. So there's really no misunderstanding where we're at. They have the exact same thing in front of them. And again, with this, just the ability to annotate it, so I'm able to write all this stuff in. The color coding feature really makes for an easier explanation for some of these concepts, and just an easier way to kind of share differing methods and kind of look at how this stuff works together. So it's just nice that I have the same page as my students, and it's just kind of that consistent part of the lesson. The other thing I like to do are these learning target checks for understandings. So again, my students have a blank sheet exactly like this, and I'll go through and we'll write our learning target together, and then I'll give them kind of 3 different problems or so to go specifically with that learning target. So again, this is just a great way to get student input, and with this Notability app, I go through all their responses the next day, and I usually pick out my favorite no's. I'll write them on here in my own handwriting, but again, it kind of gives us a nice space for us to zoom in and look at kind of what was good about the problem, what do we need to fix about the problem, and kind of go from there. So just, I love the fact that I'm able to match exactly what my students have. And really the last thing that I wanted to touch on with just using Notability in the classroom is more tied to the iPad and the Apple TV option. So kind of 2 main applications that I'll kind of add in with our more standard notes or more direct instruction piece with Notability is Desmos and GeoGebra. So both of these applications are free. Both of them are user-friendly. Both of them allow for us to apply multiple representations. I love that Desmos here, it really allows us to connect mathematical concepts to some concrete examples. So I can show something algebraically in Notability, and then I'm able to flip directly to my Desmos application and prove that same thing graphically. So just the fluidity, not having to kind of take the time to transfer back and forth between hard copy notes and then technology, it really just makes for a much smoother transition, and really engages students more in our content and our lesson. And again, with Desmos, we have the interactive task available, so I can even go through and find one of those tasks and kind of just model what I'm expecting students to do for all the students to see on the iPad. The next thing there would have been GeoGebra. So again, just like Desmos, we mentioned it's free, it's user-friendly. I love that it has the geometry piece in both 2D and 3D. But also the nice thing is that it's beyond the scope of geometry. So it has algebra features, statistics, and calculus. And the nice thing here with GeoGebra is that you're able to edit elements both by touch or by their input bars. So that's especially handy with our iPad and our kind of stylus here. So Some really nice features with GeoGebra that again really make our notes and notability come to life for students. So for instance, you see here that I have these sliders tied to a quadratic function. So with that, I'm able to turn on and off sliders, and as a class, we can kind of examine what we think these coefficients are doing prior to actually looking at our more concrete examples. So it really promotes that interactive piece, kind of that inquiry based, just the ability to use these different apps cohesively, really simply just by flipping screens. So again, just some nice features with those applications and just really nice complements to our more concrete notes. Again, I think with math it's hard because some concepts we can allow students to explore more independently, but there are just some things that really just they need some concrete direct instruction. And so Notability can kind of take those topics that do need more direct instruction and help us deliver them in a way that's really meaningful and relevant to our students.